I read the book The Facts Speak for Themselves by Brock Cole. This story is about the life of a teenage girl named Linda who witnesses the murder of one man and the suicide of another, and she has to go and talk to the police about that and also her social worker. The book starts out with Linda heading into the police station, then being questioned by the police, who ask her how old she is, what her name is, who her mom is and where she is, and who her brothers are. They also ask her how she knows the two men that were killed and the conversation she had with one of them before he died. Linda is then sent to a girls' protection center where she is met by Sister Mary Joseph, who is in charge of that center for girls, and she takes care of Linda for a bit, and soon her social worker comes in to try to get the whole side of the story to understand what happened to the two men who were killed. Linda's social worker, named Miss Passionoli, asks Linda to start from the beginning to explain the whole story. And Linda starts off with explaining the memories she has of her father and where they lived. And they started off living in an apartment near Dinkytown, and her father worked for construction. Linda's father is Native American, and his name is Charles Taylor. And as I said earlier, they lived in an apartment, and they did not have very good living conditions. They were pretty much living in poverty. And in the end, Linda's mother kicks Charles out of the house because he blames her for cheating on him, which I think she did. And Linda's father dies of carbon monoxide poisoning about a month after she kicked out of the house. After Linda's father dies, her mom gets involved with a new guy named Peter Hobbs, who ends up living with them in their apartment. And this is a very bad situation because Peter, he eventually molests Linda, and he also gets Linda's mom pregnant, and his parents come over, and they tell Linda's mom that they will not pay for the child or anything, which puts Linda's mom in a very bad position. So after Charles Taylor leaves, Linda's mom starts having like a mental breakdown. So Linda starts to take care of the family, and eventually Linda and her mom decide that they need to move away. So they call Linda's grandparents, who come to pick them up and take them to Hibbing. So Linda's first brother is born while they're in Hibbing, and as they're adjusting to the new way of life in Hibbing with their grandparents, Linda's mom meets another guy who's a lot older than her but who has a lot of money, and they end up moving away with him, and they get a house of their own. But eventually the man whose name was Arthur ends up having a stroke, and Linda's mom says she was never actually married to him, even though she was, and she just decides to move away because she can't handle it. And she was cheating on him the whole time also. So that leaves Linda to take care of Arthur, who is pretty much losing his mind because he's had a stroke and he's not in his right mind. And eventually Arthur ends up almost killing a man, and Linda has to take care of all that situation. So since Arthur, who is technically Linda's second dad, almost kills a man and he's had a stroke and he's going insane, he's taken to like a mental institute or something like that, and Linda's mom comes back to pick Linda up after all that and takes them down to Georgia, where she met another guy whose name was Frank Perry. So Frank Perry is about the fifth guy that Linda's mom becomes involved with, and they say they're going to get married, but I don't think in the end they don't get married. And Linda's mom also becomes pregnant with Frank Perry, and eventually Linda ends up having a second brother. Even though Linda's mom has had two baby boys since Linda was born, she doesn't feel the need to be responsible for them, and Linda and Frank end up taking care of them most of the time. And Linda's mom throughout the whole story just has this attitude that she can leave whenever she wants, she can spend any money that she gets, and she just isn't very responsible, which that leaves Linda with a lot of responsibilities for a young teenage girl. So as I said earlier, Linda becomes involved with the murder of one man, the suicide of another, and Jack Green, who is murdered, Linda meets him going to a birthday party for Jack Green's daughter. Yes, Jack Green is like 40 or 50 years old or something. And he learns that Linda is very interested in finance, and so is he. And that's where things kick off. So this is near the end of the book, and it's basically talking about how Linda and Jack Green have their relationship, and basically what happens is Jack Green ends up seducing Linda, and he's a real estate agent, so he has like a bunch of apartments and houses that he hasn't sold yet, and like every night or so during like a long time period, him and Linda go off and basically sleep together in these different apartments and stuff. And keep in mind, Linda's like 13 years old and he's like in his 40s, so it's a pretty weird, pretty odd relationship. Eventually, Linda and Jack Green are exposed by Jack's wife, who starts to figure out where he's going each time. And after like a long period of Jack and Linda hooking up and everything, it all comes to an end. After Linda and Jack are exposed, Linda tries to go back to living, I guess, a normal way of life. She tries to go to school, continue to take care of her brothers, but Jack just cannot seem to stay away from her. So he continues to follow her and stalk her, and this leads up to the point where they are found on the parking ramp, as I said in the beginning of the book, in the murder. So Jack comes up, start talking to Linda and trying to get her to come with him. And Frank, who I guess you could say, is at this point Linda's dad, tries to protect Linda and ends up shooting Jack Green. And honestly, I think he thought Jack was having like a relationship with Linda's mom instead of Linda, or I don't know. But he felt he had to protect Linda. So after he shoots Jack Green, he actually ends up killing himself. And yeah, that's basically how the story ends right there. So overall, in the end of the book, it ends with Linda finishing up her story, basically her life story, talking to the social worker, and it talks about how she's in school, she's functioning, and how she has stopped having unprotected sex, and she wants to move forward with her life. Alright, so yeah, this book was pretty much banned in most of the schools all around the United States. And in my own opinion, I definitely think this book should have been banned because there's like a lot of like explicit language in here, a lot of like explicit sexual content, violence, and plenty of other things that definitely should not be read by younger adults or even kids. And after I opened this book, I could see like there were like the original library cards still in there, which surprised me. And I could see that this book was placed in a middle school in Florida, and after reading it, I was even surprised to find that this was placed in a school at any point. So yeah, that's basically it.